Internationally trained speaker Diana Thomson started her business Speech Marks to empower women with public speaking skills so their voices can be heard. She provides public speaking workshops, private coaching, and editing services. Her personal experience and those that she has helped proves that increasing public speaking skills and confidence has a snowball effect in women's lives. Her coaching has been credited with new business leads, referrals, and a 15% increase in sales, increased self-confidence, and audience connection. Diana has a Bachelor of Property from the University of Auckland and was a commercial real estate agent for 15 years before relocating to Singapore. Whilst there, she was an international relocations consultant and workshop presenter. She has a Toastmasters International Advanced Communicator Bronze designation and is a certified DISC trainer in personality profiling. She's the member of Inc. Consulting Associates and the club leader of the very first New Zealand, the one and only, International Speaker Sisterhood. So please put your hands together for a warm welcome for Diana Thomson.
Thank you very much. Well done.
Did I do well?
Yes, you did well, Nicole. Well done. Well done. Thank you very much for that warm welcome and introduction. I've got a lot to share tonight, so I'm going to race through a bit and we'll have time for questions at the end, if that's all right with everybody. When I was 12 years old, I put my name forward for a small little production at school. It was a musical and I was just wanting to do the speaking part, and I got the role of King Nebuchadnezzar, King of Babylon in 1623 BC. The play was Cool in the Furnace. Now, the head of music was running this production, so she was completely focused on the choir and the orchestra. So it wasn't till dress rehearsal a couple of days beforehand that she told me, oh, you need to be able to sing a song. So all of a sudden my focus was on the song because I didn't want to make a fool of myself. Came to our one night of production and I knew as soon as I walked into the school hall that my mistake had been made. I didn't have my script on me. As it turned out, it didn't matter. The narrator decided to skip the actual introduction and my first soliloquy and just sort of dive straight into the musical itself. So I was left in the wings deciding, do I go back and start where I'm supposed to start and make her repeat, or do we just keep on going? We muddled through and things were going excellently, I thought, until the final scene. I came on to do the final soliloquy, the big hurrah, let's all be friends, kiss and make up and all of that sort of stuff. And I had a mind blank. And I looked down at the head of music, kind of like, please help me, tell me what to say. Well, she didn't have the script. She didn't care. It was only about the orchestra and the choir after all. So I looked down at the floor. Was the floor going to open up and swallow me like I was hoping? Nope. So I just kind of thought, well, show must go on. And I just picked up where I could remember. And sure enough, we got through that last song. And before I knew it, I was in the car going home. And the platitudes, shall we call them, from my mother and my grandmother, well, it told me that it was a bit of a train wreck. But it was the frosty silence of my father driving the car home which emanated, please don't put me through that again. So I decided not to put anyone through that again. It simply was not fair, was it? There's no way that I would do that to myself. I mean, any reasonable teenager would not want to make an embarrassment of themselves like that, and so that's what I did. Now, of course, as an adult, I know that's probably the worst thing I could have done to myself, because it meant that for the rest of my life, there was this little thing sitting here going, you can't act. Don't think that you can act. And so any future school productions, any chance of a Hollywood career, okay, a Shortland Street career, gone. And so that's where I have this little monkey on my back saying, you can't do that, don't be ridiculous. Now that sounds all very dramatic, and that's how I started to think recently about public speaking. I mean, ladies, public speaking, yuck. How many here would rather die than speak in front of a group like this? Well, I don't know. I've had many people that I've coached, and many of them have said they hate it, but none of them have said they'd rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy. And in fact, I started to research, why do people say they hate it so much, that it's their number one fear? And it seems that it's people's number one fear actually has come right back from when Dale Carnegie started promoting his public speaking workshops, based on no real scientific evidence, I might add. A survey last year of the United States found that it was number 52nd fear after death. And funnily, it's been going down a few pegs in the last few years, something to do with their current political situation. So that's the first thing I want to share with you tonight. Please don't subscribe to this ridiculous idea that public speaking is your greatest fear, because let's face it, it probably isn't. So on the worksheets I've handed out, well, little handout, if you want to put down what is your greatest fear compared to where does public speaking relate, take a minute to think about it. Because I can guarantee you, like my clients, it will not be your greatest fear. But here's another strange thing. Despite it really not being our greatest fear, it seems to be something that women, particularly in their 20s and 30s, are pretty bad at. Which is weird, isn't it? Because we're all born talkers, aren't we? We all came out talking. Or was that just in my household where my son was off at speech therapy while his younger sister was going blah, 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 blah. I don't know. I just had a sister and went to an all-girls school, so it's not something I really ever thought about. But research does show that not only do women speak faster than men, that on average we speak more than men. Sometimes our conversations can be up to, I don't know, 10 times as long? No, maybe about 7 or 8 times. But when they try and figure out, do women and men speak the same amount of words, they can anecdotally figure out that women speak probably about 500 more words a day than men. Apparently, statistically, that's nothing. But put in a test situation where they give people activities and then monitor the number of words, women speak less than men. And if they survey women in meetings, they speak less than men. So if we're born talkers, what's happening to us? Well, I started thinking about it. Of course, being a public speaking coach, and I figured, well, we've all got the basics, haven't we, of being a public speaker, because we all talk. And we all can do introductions. But if we could all just get to the next level of a public speaking staircase, then we'd probably find it wasn't so hard. So maybe if we're all born talkers, there's something else that's happening to us. And what could that be? Where is that born talky, chatty little 3-year-old gone? Well, maybe she's been told to be quiet at school. Maybe she's found that being compliant in her classroom, where there's lots of rowdy boys, gets her better grades or more praise. Perhaps. Maybe she's got an overstressed mother that's going, oh, those boys are at it again. Oh, but my little darling, I can always rely on you to be quiet. I'm not sure whether I'm completely innocent of saying those sorts of words to my daughter. The funny thing is that these little subliminal messages can be absorbed by a girl, and then we start to be thinking, well, it's nice to be quiet and compliant. And it's nice for the teacher to like me. And we start to think that, well, we like to be liked, don't we? I'm sorry about the buzzing, but I will try and speak up over it. The thing is that some of us even like to be liked. I didn't realise that I liked to be liked until I was going out when I was 21 and I was going out with an older man. My mum sort of going, what are you talking about, older man? Well, let me put it this way. In his wise 24-year-old self, he said to me, you know, Diana, not everybody has to like you. I literally was like, how did he know that I wanted everyone to like me? How does he know that? And the other side of me was going, what? They don't all have to like me? So I took hold of that, and let's just say 6 months later, he really did not like me, so I might have taken it a bit too far. But it was a great insight, this concept that not everyone is going to like you and not everybody actually has to like you. What does this mean as far as growing up? Well, it means sometimes that women actually start to get to the point where they think, oh, I won't put myself out there because I don't like to be accused of being bossy, even though I was just thinking I was being a bit of a leader. Many of us would have experienced that over our lifetime, that accusation of being aggressive or being bossy. And then we also start to think, well, I don't really like this idea. And we lose confidence, we hold back. And so we end up not putting ourselves out there and not taking action. And in a work sense, it's becoming a very popular field of study. And I did read just the other week your own Nicole Cohen's article on imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome. Now, if anybody's feeling brave, they can join me in putting their hand up if they have suffered from imposter syndrome. Let me remind you, well, there we go, that dreaded fear that you're not good enough, that awful feeling that that promotion is not something you deserve. What about the one where you don't think that you actually deserve the credit you've just been given for the work that you've just done? Men suffer from it too, but it's more common in women. And I just saw a headline recently that said 2/3 of British women think that they or have suffered from imposter syndrome. And of course, if we're feeling like that, we're not going to put ourselves out there. And of course, in New Zealand, we've got this little cracker to add to it, haven't we? The tall poppy syndrome. Now, I thought that tall poppy syndrome had its day until I read the Herald Online after they announced the New Zealand Women of Influence Awards. And hiding in their computers behind false names and profiles were people saying, I've never heard of these women. They can't be very influential. I've never heard of them. Well, Alison Mao, I've heard of her, but the other ones, they can't have influenced anybody. Seriously, I am not kidding you. If that wasn't going to feed into people's tall poppy syndrome, what else wouldn't? So like many of you, I grew up in this kind of mixture of trying to be the girl and woman that my family and my school had wanted me to be, and getting all these other negative messages. I did okay, as Nicole said, went to university. And in 2008, my little family, my husband and my son and I, moved to Singapore. I was going to be an expat wife, which on the surface sounds amazing. Of course it does. Overseas holidays and a full-time live-in helper. Beautiful Asian food, someone to do your cooking every night. What about all the other amazing fun things you get to do? Oh, there's someone to do your washing as well. Glamorous to the hilt. I have to say, on the outside, it looks amazing. But after a couple of years of getting over my baby blur, did I mention I arrived pregnant with my 1-year-old? We actually started to think, oh, what do I do? How am I going to get over this feeling that I'm not really needed? So I trotted along again to a counsellor for the second time in my life to try and work through some of the issues that I was facing. And it was there she said after a while, you know what, Diana? It's okay to not feel like you belong. I know this expat wife, or as we like to be politically correct, trailing spouse, this thing, yes, it's such a thing. We like to think it's all champagne and cocktails, but there's a darker side to it. You see, it started when you got this little thing called a dependent pass. And my kids had a dependent pass. So we were both completely dependent on my husband. Now, for my kids, that doesn't mean too much, but for me, it meant that I couldn't have my own bank account. I certainly couldn't have my own Visa card, and I couldn't even have my own mobile phone account. So when I lost it, off I had to go, take my husband to the shop, spend his valuable Saturday morning getting a new phone. And of course, my husband was dependent on the fact that his company wanted him to be there. And if they decided they didn't, we had to pack up and leave within 2 weeks. And their company was, of course, dependent on Singapore government graciously allowing them to have a foreign worker. So you can imagine right down the food chain, this woman who had gone on maternity leave and not gone back was starting to wonder who she was and what would she do. So my counsellor and I decided that we would find Diana an out-of-home project. She said to me, what about, getting a job with the helper and everything? Should be pretty easy. I said, getting a job in a foreign country? I don't think I have the confidence to even apply for a job in New Zealand right now. No. So a decision was made, largely by me, that I would join Toastmasters and see if I could continue on what I'd started with another expat wife, which was public speaking training. Now this is where Lady Luck does get some credit. I actually chose the Toastmasters Club of Singapore because it was just down the road, it was every Monday, and they provided dinner. Ticked all the boxes. As it happened, they had public speaking coaches, they had the future world champion of public speaking as a member, and they also had professional speakers and professional coaches. So the standard was very high. I thought I was doing okay, but then I had to start clawing my way up. And as I started to get a little bit better and work a little bit harder, I started to think, this is quite nice. Whether it be 2 minutes an impromptu speech or 7 minutes for a prepared speech, they're listening to me. Because I wasn't having much like at home between the yappity yap yap, the boy that didn't speak and the husband that was in India, and the deafness of a foreign domestic worker that just didn't seem to suddenly understand or hear me. I felt like at home I wasn't being heard, but here at Toastmasters, I was being heard. It was a revelation to me. 6 months later, I applied for a job. I plucked up the courage to apply for a job. And they said, well, we don't have any at the moment. But would you like to do our workshops? So all of a sudden, I went from unemployed to getting paid to speak and do my newfound love. It was a eureka moment, and that's when I started to feel like I belonged, and my confidence slowly clawed back up to possibly what it might have been all those years ago. When we moved back to New Zealand in 2014, I settled everybody in, and in 2016, I set up Speechmarks Coaching. Let's just say, well, business was a little bit slow. I did some online courses, and in between reading the next book in my stack of public speaking books, because you've got to research and find out what the competition's doing, so to speak, I started to research women's issues and those kind of books that I'd always meant to get around to reading, you know, the ones. And this was at the top of the pile. Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In. We've heard of it? People, yeah, I've read it. Some people love it, some people don't agree with it totally, but I found it fascinating. And at the same time, I joined the Venus Network and I started to meet all these women, many of whom were very good at their field, but asked them to stand up and say what they did, and they turned to, well, speechless almost, some of them. I didn't understand. Why would standing up and saying what you do and why you're good at it render someone speechless? I supplemented it with other great classics, Arianna Huffington's Thrive, my personal favourite, Lois Frankel's Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office, and most recently a book called The Confidence Code by Katie Kay and Claire Shipman. All of these, in some way or another, were saying what I'd experienced and what I was witnessing, that for some variation of reasons, women more than men have a resistance to speaking up, to self-promotion, to calling out someone else, even to asking or answering questions in a meeting. And I felt heartbroken in many ways. But I felt quite determined that if my solution to my absolute confidence low could be found through public speaking, maybe it could work for other people. And so in my Toastmasters groups here, I started to pay more attention to the women that were in them. And sure enough, I found more problems than I did answers. I even stumbled across this sort of thing from Forbes. Women's tendency to shy away from self-promotion, feel like they're bragging, is a key barrier to advancement. Now, ladies, that particularly aims at 20 and 30-year-olds. I imagine some of you here are going and trying to think back. I think you'll probably find you might have had some instances. Or maybe you want to look at your daughter, or maybe you've got colleagues or team members. Have a look and notice, is that what they're doing? Are they not self-promoting? Are they not answering questions? So tonight I'd like to offer some solutions. Would that be fair? And that would sound appealing? Let's offer some solutions to all these problems that keep getting put up. I've said at the very beginning here on my title slide that there's a public speaking confidence cycle. But the problem is most people go, I'm not confident, so I can't speak in public. But that's where I want to reframe it. First of all, I said to you, reframe it. It's not your number one fear. You might dislike it. You might not particularly want to be in my shoes right now. But as many of you have proved, you can do it. Well, first of all, you've got the basic necessity of the ability to speak. Second of all, you've all spoken in front of a small group here tonight, which also means that you've used some public speaking skills. So in fact, it doesn't matter whether you think it's the chicken or the egg. You're actually in a cycle, and it's a yin and yang cycle. The more you start to think about public speaking as something you do every day, the more you're going to realise that the better you are at it and the more that you use it consciously, the more confident you'll get about it. And in fact, the more confident you might actually get about a whole lot of other things. Now, just last week, a lady in my Toastmasters group said, oh, I love the idea of confidence because I did something recently to help build my self-confidence. I thought, oh, eureka, that's exactly what I'm going to talk to the Auckland Executive Club about. She said, I'm training for a marathon. Well, I trained for a marathon once as well. And it was great while I was training. I thought, I'm reaching that goal. But the problem was, once I'd reached that goal, what happened to the training? Stopped, didn't it? And the thing with something like reaching a goal like doing a marathon is that you reach the goal and then you stop. And you don't tend to use that skill anywhere else in your life. And the other problem is that you sort of lose your fitness because you're not doing it regularly, unless of course you're really, really, really into running marathons. But the great thing about using public speaking as something to build your self-confidence, as a tool to build confidence, is that you are doing it almost every day. Certainly if you start to think about it in the idea that you're speaking to a meeting, that you're going to a networking group, or even just the fact that you're going to pitch to one or two people and you're going to start using body language more to your advantage, that's when you actually start thinking, I'm actually doing it all the time. So I looked into this confidence public speaking idea and I started to think, well, what do other people say? And if you Google confidence cycle and click on images, you'll find a little diagrams. And they look a lot like my own diagram. You have to start with somewhere, so let's start with baseline confidence, that you can speak to 2 or 3 people. And you decided to public speaking, consciously using skills is something that you want to do. Here's the kicker with confidence. You have to take action. Confidence is something that seems like an emotion. It seems like an attitude, right? But the difference between self-efficacy, just a belief that you can do something, and self-confidence, a knowledge that you can do something, is just that you actually take action to prove that you can. So if we take action and we deliver a speech, we say in speaking there's 3 different kinds of speeches, 3 versions of a speech. There's a speech you wrote, there's a speech you gave, and a speech you run through in your head going, oh, I forgot to say that. The point is that with most speaking, there is going to be success and there's going to be some failures. And if you're lucky to have someone that's a Toastmaster and has done speech evaluations, or has agreed that both of you want to improve your public speaking skills in some way, you can help each other, you can mentor each other in a way, and you can keep track of things like those pause fillers. And you can kindly tell each other what was good and maybe what you could do better next time. But the most important thing about confidence building is that, in fact, you realise that success and failure are all part and parcel. Failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is a part of success. And if you embrace failure, then you're going to build up resilience and then you get confidence. So it seems like I'm splitting hairs here, but there is proven to be a real difference between this kind of airy-fairy belief you can do something and proof that you can do something. But failures. I know that you're thinking, yeah, that's fine for you to say, Diana. You don't know what failure is. Well, let me tell you, if you wouldn't mind, about my biggest. Why not? Let's lay it all out. In 2013, I'd been at Toastmasters a couple of years, and I decided it was time for a bit of a stretch. Get outside my comfort zone, challenge myself, all that sort of good stuff they tell you to do. So I entered the club's annual speech evaluation contest. Now, I was quite comfortable with the fact that I wasn't going to win. The reason I wasn't going to win is because I, in fact, was competing against a public speaking sort of a coach, no, not a coach, a workshop presenter and coach, another professional speaker, and I think you'd call him the professional competition enterer because he joined so many clubs that he always managed to get to the national finals. At dinner beforehand, I was casually eating and my mentor Manoj came up to me and said, Diana, do you know about the scoring system? No, there's a scoring system? Oh, you could see his face. Really? I said, okay, give me some pointers. And so he did. 10% of the mark and the conclusion, right, okay, 10% of the mark, do a good conclusion, got it. I was as surprised as anybody else, maybe even more so, that I won that competition. I had to check my diary to see if I could go to the area competition in a couple of weeks. So I did a bit more sort of chats with Manoj, and then I also did some sort of extra speech evaluations. Yes, there's such a thing that you can do where you listen to people's speeches and then write down your evaluation. And I did that, and I rocked up to the area's competition. So that would be about 7 clubs competing against each other. And when they announced me as the winner of that competition, I remember standing there and going, oh, it really helps to have English as your native language, clearly. I didn't realise I had such an advantage. Notice that? I didn't give myself any credit for what I just achieved. On we went to the next level, to districts. And again, as they announced myself as the winner, and I went, oh my God, this is embarrassing. Oh, it might really help seem I'm the only Caucasian here. Yeah, distinct advantage, yay. And then right up beside me came the serial competition winner. Here he is, holding a trophy as well, because he just won the humorous speech competition, but that's not what he wanted to tell me. He wanted to say, and he did it like this, ladies. So Diana, I'll see you at this speech evaluation contest final. I got in through another club. I was up against him again, and the mind games began. Of course, I went straight to Manoj and let him know, oh, I won this one. He said he wanted to share 2 things with me. One was that people had already asked him, how come Diana, who's never entered the competition, is doing so well? I was like, yeah, do tell. It wasn't the sheets of paper that he'd designed specifically for this competition and for speech evaluations, he'd said to people. It was the fact that I'd remained coachable, that I was always willing to improve and change if I needed to change. Oh, that's nice. The next bit of news, not so nice. He said, Dana, 3 people are now paying me to coach them in the finals. So unless you're going to pay me, I can't really do it. I was like, pay you? There's no prize. In a Toastmasters competition, there's no prize, there's no money, there's nothing. It's just the glory. So I said, oh, it's fine, don't worry, I've got this. Because I wasn't that worried about winning. I couldn't believe I got as far as I had. And so I did what most Kiwis would do. I rocked up. Hello, I'm here for the speech evaluation contest. The lady looked at me and went, huh? Apparently, you're supposed to actually enroll in the whole entire conference, even if you're just there because you're in the evaluation contest. Whoopsies. I just thought, okay, brush it off, no big deal. I'll go on up. And they took me upstairs. And I thought, oh, this is a really nice community centre. Quite a lot of them in Singapore, in all the different areas. And they opened the doors. I went, oh boy. The community centre was actually what we in New Zealand would call a ballroom with theatre-style seating for 500 people. And do you know the words that kept ringing around in my head? You're not in Guatemala now, Dr. Rolpata. The classic Shortland Street line. Well, the next thing in my head was, I wonder if I click my heels, will I be able to go home? Because I am way out of my depth here, way out of my depth. Because I looked to the right and up there was a stage, a really high stage, and there was someone standing there with this headset microphone on, like all the singers have, and that. Oh my God, I've never used a headset microphone. I am stuffed. Every little thing started to put me off my A game, assuming I actually had one. And of course, Muggins here, well, he was on top of me real fast, because there was no way he was going to lose to me again. I went to the holding room after what was supposed to be a speech, but I would prefer to describe as a one-woman play, and had to think up a recommendation for something she could do better next time. I paced up and down and up and down and up and down and started speaking to the professional speaker that was going to do a workshop. That didn't help or calm my nerves. I went out onto the stage and the 2.5 minutes went by in a flash. Except they were 2 minutes 35, which meant I was disqualified. Manoj came up to me very quickly. I think he wanted to be the first person to let me know that I was probably disqualified. Now, the natural reaction that I had was to basically find the exit and keep on running until I found some mojitos to drown my sorrows. Of course, I had to stand there and smile and hold my participation certificate like... It took me, and I'm not exaggerating, a month before I would give another speech evaluation at my Toastmasters club. It traumatised me. It took me even more months before I actually thought, you know what, I might have actually learnt something in this last round. And I did. Apart from the fact that it actually pays to remain coachable, I learned all sorts of lessons that I never, ever learnt on the first, second, and third round. About knowing where your venue is, what the stage is, what's the microphone system like, and the list goes on and on. It was the best thing I could have done long term for my speaking and for my speaking career, which I hadn't even thought of having at that stage. So, success is great, but failure sometimes can be better. My point here is don't be too hard on yourself. We all have times that we think, no, that wasn't what I wanted to deliver. So now that hopefully I've reframed it a little bit for you, I'd like to see if you can figure out what you might find useful. I had the staircase analogy at the beginning, so I'm going to reuse that for where you might be. If we're climbing a staircase, then we need to be able to crawl before we can walk, and then hopefully we'll be able to run a bit faster. And you never know, one day if you have to do a big conference or a TED Talk, you too could be dancing on the stage. So let's start down in the little baby steps. sometimes getting good at the basics is something that you have to revisit before you move up a step. So are you good at meet and greets? Now that sounds ridiculously simple, but in an article I found a few weeks ago, a leadership author called Jack Zenger says that this is one of the most basic things you can do to appear more confident, is be really good at meeting and greeting people. I know. I do remember one person used to introduce me frequently to other people and go, Diana, Sarah, Sarah, Diana. And Diana and Sarah would be left going, hi. It didn't help either of us, and it made us think, I remember that particular time, does she not remember what I've done or how she knows me? Oh, this is uncomfortable. So if it's something that you think you could improve on, why not take it as your first step? Then let's just speak up, particularly for the 20 and 30-year-olds. Again, it could be someone in your team, it could be someone in your office. Make them speak up at every team meeting. In some way, have an opinion, be prepared. Ask, get them to ask, or make sure that you ask or answer a question every time you're at a networking group, or you're in a meeting, or you're with clients. Participate. It sounds really basic, but if you start to examine how good you are at it, you might actually be a little bit surprised. And listening skills. Oh, aren't they just a thing of the olden days? Active listening is something that's becoming less and less common. Active listening is when you look at people and go, oh, okay. And then you're ready to move up the conversation if you need to. But you're actively in the room listening to everyone at that meeting, even the person that's going on and on. And at this level, I'd also challenge you to look at your female superpowers. The Confidence Code book has quite a few depressing chapters on how women's brains are not so inclined to be confident. And I didn't like them, and I'm sure you wouldn't like it either. So I'm only going to tell you the good stuff. Women have a tendency to use both sides of their brains. Your left side is your analytical side, the number crunching side. Your right side is the creative side, the pictures, the emotion. But women tend to use both sides more than men. What does this mean? Well, classically, we're good at multitasking because we're using those developed pathways. But we're also good at problem solving, on seeing other people's points of view. Does this sound familiar? These are the kinds of things that we bring that men don't necessarily do as well. Now, the other great thing is we've got better impulse control, which of course means that we're also better at making judgments. Now, I appreciate these are generalizations that some of you are going, I don't know about that. But they are also based in some fact. Now, the other thing that we're good at is, of course, the multitasking and collaborating. So use those to your best advantage, even within your speaking. The next one, at that middle level, where you've got beyond just meeting and greeting and asking and answering questions, is this one. Have you all got a great elevator pitch? Yes, because you all go to networking meetings, right? But is it up to date? When was the last time you thought, what am I going to say that's going to make those people go, wow, that sounds interesting? Or what's my news story and my client's success? Is it updated? Is it interesting? Or could you develop it out to what I call more of an escalator ride, where it's more of a two-way conversation, where the other person's actually going, wow, okay, sorry, what does that mean? It's a conversation rather than a 30-second. We'll also want you to think about structuring your answers. What I mean by structuring answers, I mean you just answer, don't you? Well, a structured answer is something that Toastmasters is really good at teaching through their thing called table topics, where you have to get up and they encourage you to answer a question with a opening, responding to the question, a body, what the real story or the answer is, and then wrapping it up and putting a conclusion on it. But just as equally, you might then get to structure it. This is the problem, this is the solution, these are the benefits. Or you might say, in the past, we did this. In the future, we'll do this sort of thing. So you actually start to get more of a structure around your answers. So if you think you're in this middle level here, maybe you should start to challenge yourself to make really good answers to every question you're asked. Purposeful body language. We call this the egg beater. Those nervous hands that just don't seem to be able to stay still. We try and stop that at this level. If this is you, I recommend that if you're practicing a speech, get a bouncy ball. A big blow-up one or a $2 shop one that's about that big, and you practice holding it. Because when you've practiced feeling comfortable with your hands like this stops. Or the worst ones, these closed arms. These ones, or men often do that one, which is a bit disturbing. But it also will pull your hands out of your pockets, because research shows that we don't trust people with hands in their pockets because they might have a gun or some kind of weapon. Now that sounds ridiculous, but it goes right back to the old cave days where people literally did hide weapons and then spring them upon you. So open body language be something that we might concentrate on there. And again, this might be your challenge, so have a think about whether that's something that you'd like to work on. And just to point that out, that you've got space there on that sheet if you've suddenly decided, ooh, that sounds good, that's going to be my next thing. And of course, feeling relaxed. I get nervous, how can I calm my nerves, are always the big topic when we're talking about public speaking. And I've got a whole separate 20-minute presentation on that, but there are a number of techniques. And the most important one, I am afraid to say, is practice. Oh, and practice. And don't forget to practice, because you don't learn an instrument or get good at a sport without practice. And you don't give long 30, 40-minute speeches or even 10-minute ones or even a 3-minute one without a bit of practice. Winston Churchill was famous for delivering amazing speeches, and his idea was that he'd do an hour practice for every minute of the speech. Now, that's probably not quite what we'd want to use, because he actually spoke incredibly slowly. So it might even be more. But that's one of the top ways, I'm afraid to say, of how to feel more relaxed. And then, of course, at this mid-level amongst business presentations, you're going to be using PowerPoint. And at the next level, we'll talk about actually it being less of that distraction of bullet points and more of something that aids you. So what about at that upper level? Maybe we were actually doing something like an AGM or a big important client pitch. What would we be looking at there? No filler words. Or my personal favourite one to hate, like if my daughter said like one more time, sometimes I want to, because it's so annoying, like, you know what I mean? Yes, some people do, the like. So here's a top tip if filler words are your challenge. Apparently when we speak in normal conversation, we don't put in filler words, or very few, and that's because we are French and they're just part of the language. Again, another cliche, but you know what I mean. The thing is that when we speak to people in a conversation, we look into their eyes, or we look around their faces. And apparently if you look at people's faces, not at their foreheads, not just above their heads like some people will tell you to do, your chances of it going are far less. So look at people's faces when you speak to them, even in a public speaking setting. Of course, that has the other advantage that it helps create connection and engagement with your audience. And it also might mean that if it's after dinner and it's hot, they're less likely to nod off. Okay, so this is the big one. This is where I really work hard with some of my female clients. The 3 Ps: pause, pitch, and pace. Pause has 3 uses in itself. Number 1, if you're rattling off or at least putting down a lot of information, you should make time for a pause. Because you can actually say things quite fast and it can take a while for your audience to catch up. So you put on your speech, if it's down in writing, a little hash line to remind yourself to take a nice long pause and let everybody catch up. Now the other great thing about a pause is it's like a silent exclamation mark. By having silence after saying something important, it helps make it sound even more important. And they do that in symphonies. As the music gets faster and or more excitable, there's a pause. You pause for effect. The third one is where you pause to actually let people answer a question. So if I was to ask Cindy a question, or the whole audience a question at the moment, I'm going to pick on Cindy because she knows me and she'll forgive me later. But if I was asking the whole audience a question about when was the last time you spoke to 50 people, inside Cindy's head she would go, oh, now watch my hands. She asked us a question. I wonder what did she ask? 50 people. Oh, when did I do that? Oh, I did that last week, didn't I? Oh, is anyone else going to put their hand up and answer the question? I will. And between 5 and 7 seconds it could take for someone to process the question and then answer it. Particularly if you're in a room of women, because of course we're a little bit more shy. We're not quite inclined to shout out. The next one is pitch. Many surveys will agree that a deeper, lower resonance to the voice is more authoritative. So we trust people with a deeper voice. Slight problem when you're a female and you've got a higher register. So that can be helped with a training to breathe down right in the diaphragm, slow the voice down, and take in a deeper pitch. And if that's your challenge, you might even want to get a speech therapist kind of coach rather than a public speaking coach. But the one thing I plead, and I really mean plead, with my Toastmasters group or anything else, is please ditch the rising inflection. Does anybody know what I mean? Because in New Zealand, it's getting quite common. The rising inflection. When we make a statement, but we put a higher register at the end, to make it, and it makes it sound like a question. Now, if you're in a business meeting and you start doing this, you don't sound like you're really confident about your opinion or your point of view, because just through the rise of your voice, you've sort of turned a bit into a question, like you're looking for approval. You're not quite sure. So that's the thing. I ask you, if you think that you or your colleague or someone in your team or your children are employing the rising inflection, try to get them to stop as soon as possible, or at least reduce it and conscientiously reduce it. And then there's pace. Women, on average, speak faster than men, so sometimes we have to slow it down a bit. But more importantly, we need to use pace to vary our pace, because what happens if there's no variation in pace? If it's a slow pace, we call that a monologue, and it's boring. And you just wish they'd get finished. But if they speak this quickly all the time, you basically go, woo, too fast, can't be bothered thinking about what they're saying. So it's a bit of variety. Next in this area, and this might be many of you, where you want to reduce modifiers and caveats. Have you ever started the answer to a question, well, this is just my opinion. I don't know, I'm not 100% sure, I haven't finished working the numbers. Surely there's a better way of saying that. If you start with I'm not sure, then you're not going to sound authoritative. You're not going to sound like the confident, competent, knowledgeable woman that you are. So that would be something that would be restructuring in a lot of your public speaking. And of course, you get to this level and all of a sudden, we're going to take the notes off you. And we're going to make you be out here using that purposeful body language. And the PowerPoint will become an aid, not a prop. It'll be more about the pretty pictures and the feelings and the emotions than it will be about the words. So what about at the dancing level? If anybody over here is about to speak at a conference, you might want to look at audience analysis. Audience analysis is where you figure out, am I in a room full of engineers that are predominantly left-brained, that like the analytical side, that want to know the facts and figures, that maybe want to know the how and the when, and they'll take it away to digest? Or am I in a room full of the influencer types that love to talk and chat and use colourful, inclusive language? Which one are they? Or are they a mixture of both? Well, of course the answer is they're a mixture of both, but maybe you can vary what you say and when you say it and how you supplement it according to what your audience might be inclined to do. And then I'll help you replace lots of I language with you, because you is said to be the most persuasive word in the English language. We'll look at incorporating stories. Facts tell, stories sell. So you need to have a nice journal of stories. You need to know really well the last client story and the client coming up story, because that's what's going to sell you in the end. Yes, you'll have to prove the numbers, but the feel-good stories are the things that are going to really help. Or maybe it's the flip side. It's the downside of what happened before you became involved, for example. And a structure is also something that's really important. I'm working with a young lady at the moment, and she is an inspirational speaker. It's a great honour to be asked to help her. But once I showed her how I would like her to structure her speech, the penny dropped through showing her physically online, saying, I want you to take your audience down low, like really low. Everything you say and the words you use must paint the picture of how horrible it got. And then we'll start to take them up. And then we'll start to use hopeful language. And when she saw the way that the line went through the course of her speech, she understood how she needed to change the structure of the sentences and the words and the tone of her voice. And we'll use the stage, the speaking area. This is the past. This was the 12-year-old me. This is the present. It's the current me, for example. And this might be the future that I'm going to inspire you to think about in time. We'll also want you to sell from the middle of the stage. And when perhaps you need to retract back and talk about something that's not so happy, we might move you back towards the back of the stage. But you'll never be walking up and down, pacing the stage. It would be much better for you to stand still than do that, of course. So those are some of the things that you can look back and say, yep, I'm doing that well, or no, I need to improve. But this is the key, ladies. It's been said, with public speaking, you may never be ready. You just have to start. And of course, now you know that you do it at this kind of function, and you probably do it at meetings during the week. So you're actually using your public speaking skills all the time. You just need to reframe them in a way that means that you're consciously using them. Now, of course, as a public speaking coach, I'm going to say this is going to help you build your confidence. So I've got backup here. Sandra said in an email, working on impromptu speeches has made me much more confident at speaking up at work. She's in my Toastmasters club. And this is a long one, but this young lady is very shy. Instrumental in building my confidence. This shy little thing that came to our Toastmasters group has actually written the funniest speech I've ever heard at Toastmasters, but I still can't convince her to do anything more with it than that. One of the reasons I wanted to focus on women is because I knew that women were having greater challenges than their male counterparts. I could see it at Toastmasters. And I found a thing called the Speaker Sisterhood, and I brought it over from the United States. We've been going since February, and this is one of many of my star pupils, including Cindy Bakewell. Oh, Marsha, whose second language is English, or might be her third, said to me, "Getting better at public speaking has given me the confidence to speak up in professional meetings and with major stakeholders and feel easier about speaking to CEOs." Another lady has said that she's finally managed to speak to her company when she wasn't willing to do it before. So I offer speaking coaching through something like the Speaker Sisterhood, but there is 160 Toastmasters in the Auckland region, ladies. 160 of them. Some of them are closed to the public because they're only people that work in a company. But surely out of the rest of them, you could find one that suited your time and location, work or home. And as I said, and there's more information at the back that I offer public speaking coaching, workshops. I've done one with Gavin on using AV equipment. And also I do industry specific ones because that's the other thing that's not available very much anymore. In consulting, we actually have a specific public speaking workshop for residential real estate agents and a different version of that for people in the financial services because their needs are quite specific. So to quote my gorgeous sister, public speaking is a gift that keeps on giving. It really does, because you keep on using it and you can keep on building it and you can keep on benefiting from it. So the next thing I want to, and I plead with you, don't be this guy. For those of you who can't read, it says, just make it up as you go along, like everybody else. Do not make it up as you go along. Do not wing it. You actually need to prepare and practice. Whether it's Winston Churchill's 1 hour per minute of your speech, which could be quite a lot of hours, make sure you schedule it in. One of the downsides of being a public speaking coach is that I have to take my own advice sometimes. Now, once upon a time, I actually had to take my own advice and actually start and write my conclusion before I started writing my introduction. But last year, I decided it was time to take my own advice and push myself out of my comfort zone, to challenge myself yet again. And there was one thing that I knew I could do, which is speak and talk and memorize lines. But I still was not sure whether I could actually act, because the 12-year-old me had said, no, we are not going to do that again. Well, I don't have time to, or the free evenings to do a community play or something like that. So I thought, well, just chuck yourself in the deep end. Why not? What harm can come of it? Let's see if you can act. And so I did. This is me being Maureen. At the attention of Mike Bungay in the recent TV miniseries, Dear Murderer. And the irony of this part is that there was no speaking. So it was perfect. And the only person that knew on that whole entire set, that over the 3 days that we were shooting my parts, was that I was a public speaking coach, was when we kept doing the retake as I jumped in the car with the actor who was playing Mike Bungay and we were whizzing up and down. And he thought that that was hilarious. And of course I could see the funny side of it as well. You need to push yourself every now and then, because if you don't, you will never find out whether you can, but you'll always know that you can't. So have you got an action list? Have you figured out what it is that you want to work on? Have you identified your issues? Or maybe it's your team's issues and that you can help them. Figure them out. I've given you some ideas of what you might want to work on. And then my next plea to you is please don't leave it to the New Year's resolution plan. Put it in the professional development plan or the personal development plan, but not the New Year's resolution plan. As my coach Manoj said, Be coachable. Have an open mindset to the fact that you can become a more confident public speaker or just a speaker in a meeting. And my other plea, seeing I'm in an almost entirely female audience, is please help each other. Madeleine Albright has said that there is a special place in hell for women who don't help each other. Now, I'm not too sure about that, but I do know from personal experience that it's an incredibly wonderful feeling to know that if you've helped another woman find her voice in some way and use it. And lastly, like I said, you're going to have to practice a lot, maybe more than you want to, but you will reap the benefits. And I wish you all the best of luck on whichever part of the staircase you're on, but do remember, it's not something that you can't conquer with a bit of help or a bit of support from other people. But I do know it will build your self-confidence and your self-esteem, or it will do that for one of your colleagues or your family. So please have an open mindset and think of public speaking not as the thing that you fear the most, but the thing that you would like to try the most. Thank you.
Are there any questions? I'm waiting for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Millie?
Have you got any tips for when you're speaking to a group such as ourselves, we're a round table, as opposed to if you're up at on a stage?
Sure. So the question is suggestions on speaking to when there's table groups like this, which is a great question, particularly for any future speakers here. First of all, to do that thing about looking at people, picking out. So you could do it systematically, like with each table I'm going to start there, and then next time I come to this table I'm going to start there, look there and look there. But it's about looking around and speaking to an individual person rather than that advice that some people give of just aim at the top of their heads and look at the top of their heads. But that doesn't relax you because you're not speaking to a specific person, and you'll feel more relaxed, particularly if you've got some faces in the crowd that you know and that you can sort of say, you know, like be my friendly person at this table or whatever it is that helps you. But you can, as I say, work around the room systematically. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then they'll all feel like you're speaking to their table or to them. Do you have other questions? Well, no other questions. Last thing to say. Remember, tomorrow you're not going to necessarily remember what I said, but hopefully you will remember my energy and enthusiasm for what I've spoken about. And you'll probably think back and think, oh, I don't remember what Glenn Sharkey said the other month, but gosh, he was enthusiastic. So that's what I say to you. If nothing else, take your energy and your enthusiasm and your joy for whatever your subject is and convey that, because they'll remember that and they'll carry that with you, because you're a knowledgeable, clever woman. You just need to let everyone else know. So thank you and good luck.
On behalf of the club, we'd like to thank you, obviously, for tonight and all your shared wisdom. So that was awesome. And I've got to have a gift.
Oh, thank you.
And a membership to the club. I'd like to be a member.
Thank you very much. What a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.